हाय गाइस, वेलकम टू अवर यूट्यूब चैनल एमबीए पाठशाला। तो एमबीए पाठशाला ने आप लोगों की स्पीड बूस्ट करने के लिए, आपकी टेस्ट टेकिंग एबिलिटी को इंप्रूव करने के लिए एक फ्री डेली क्विज का इनिशिएटिव लिया है, जिसको आप लोग हमारे पोर्टल पर www.mbapathshala.com पर जाकर हमारा जो फ्री कोर्सेज का सेक्शन है, कैट 2026 फ्री प्रिपरेशन एक कोर्स है, उसमें एनरोल करके आप डेली बेसिस पर एक फ्री क्विज लगा सकते हो। ये क्विजेज आप लोगों के एग्जाम यानी कि कैट 2026 तक हम लोग प्रोवाइड कराने वाले हैं। हमारे यूट्यूब चैनल पर इसका एनालिसिस मिलेगा, क्विज रहेगी हमारे पोर्टल पर।
Hi students, in this session of Daily Dose, what we are going to discuss is a few quality questions on odd one out. The level of questions is pretty good. So let's get started. Let's look at the first question. So team, in the first question, what exactly are we discussing? Try to identify the subject matter. The subject matter out here is, of course, synaptic pruning. Synaptic pruning, which is going on. Take a brief pause. Try to read the sentences and let's try to figure out which sentences are connected and which sentences are not. So what are we discussing, students? We are discussing synaptic pruning that goes on during adolescence. Pruning means when you sort of remove, prune, so you eliminate. Students, there is selective elimination going on, selective elimination of those synaptic connections, those neural connections. So now that you've read it once, I'm telling you what the answer is. Students, the answer is option 3, sentence number 3. That is the odd one. It doesn't get connected. Let's see how the other sentences are connected and what's that which makes the third sentence disconnected. During adolescence, the human brain undergoes a massive neural remodeling. Students, remodeling of the human brain happens during adolescence. And what is that remodeling? That remodeling is synaptic pruning. That means the nerve cells, the synapses, the neural changes happen. Synaptic pruning happens. So the structure of the brain changes to some extent. Now, this is selective elimination. This is selective elimination of some neural connections, some nerve cells. This selective elimination operates on a use it or lose it principle. So how does it operate? How does the synaptic neural pruning take place? So all the other sentences are connected. The resulting reduction in total synaptic density. So when this synaptic pruning takes place, the total synaptic density reduces, there is reduction. However, it is paradoxical that the number of nerve cells is going down, the number of synaptic connections is going down, the number of neural connections is decreasing, but there is an overall increase in operational efficiency and processing speed of that brain. So during adolescence, our brain becomes more efficient because of the synaptic pruning. The processing speed increases. There is selective elimination of nerve cells, which happens on what basis does it happen? On a use it or lose it basis. That means if that connection is really required, if we are using it, then the brain is going to keep it, otherwise the brain is going to lose it. Through this selective streamlined wiring, the prefrontal cortex achieves maturity. So the adolescent brain achieves maturity, and what happens? Its executive functions become more advanced. So what are we discussing, students, in entirety? We are discussing these synaptic changes, this selective elimination, and how it happens and what is its impact. Its impact is that it makes the process much faster, and of course the executive functions become more advanced and impulse control also happens. So overall, how the process takes place and what is its impact. Students, 3 takes the discussion in a different direction altogether. It not only illustrates the need. Were we discussing the need for optimization of neural processes, that from time to time we need to optimize our neural processes? Where was this need being discussed? So it's a different idea altogether. It also validates the idea of architectural adaptability of the human brain. it also proves, validates means proves. It also proves that the human brain's architecture is adaptable, it is changeable, what we call the plasticity of human brain. So students, in this paragraph, what were we discussing? How the synaptic pruning takes place and what is its overall impact. Over here, we did not want to validate, we did not want to prove that yes, indeed, the human brain is adaptable, it can be modified, its architecture can be changed. That's a different idea altogether, trying to prove that even human brain can change itself. Got the point? Let's read further. The next question, students, take a brief pause. Take a brief pause. What are we discussing over here? We are discussing some structures. What kind of structures are we discussing, students? We are discussing some monuments. Public monuments are being discussed, and how these public monuments function as vectors of commemoration. Commemoration, when you try to recall and honor, when you try to recall and honor someone. Generally, such monuments are built in the memory of those who have died, in the memory of those who have sacrificed their lives, something of that sort. By anchoring memory to a singular, unyielding physical form. So what is that unyielding physical form, team? That unyielding physical form is that public monument, which honors those who have laid down their lives, those who have lost their lives. By anchoring memory to a singular unyielding physical form, that singular unyielding physical form is something like a tomb, The state effectively domesticates historical trauma. So that trauma which happened in the past, something like Shakti Sthal or something like India Gate, which commemorates those who laid down their lives for the country. That's how the state, the government, domesticates historical trauma and neutralizes its radical potential. Now, team, shall I tell you what the answer is, which is the disconnected sentence? The disconnected sentence is 4, and we will see why it is so. Consequently, this static preservation insulates the populace from ongoing structural ramifications of past violence by framing it as a closed chapter. So that particular vector, that spatial vector of commemoration, that monument basically preserves, it shows, it is a static preservation of that past. It is a static preservation of that past, and it shows, it proves that the past violence is no longer going on. It's a closed historical chapter. So when we visit India Gate, we realize that, okay, the ones who died in the past during the war, that war is over, and now, we have moved on, and this chapter, that chapter of history is completely closed. It's completely over. This aesthetic reification, when you reify, you make something concrete, you make something abstract, you turn something abstract into something concrete. I told you at the start, the level of questions is on the higher side. What is that aesthetic reification? When you make it aesthetic, beautiful, that monument is a beautiful reminder. It is a beautiful way to commemorate the memory of those people, to honor those people. So this aesthetic reification, because you have turned it into something concrete, that monument, that hardcore structure. This aesthetic reification ensures that collective remembrance, that commemoration is continually steered towards state-sanctioned consensus, because the state got that monument built. That's how the state shows us that the violence is now a closed chapter. The violence is no longer going on. That monument is a permanent landscape of the city, and it is sort of a state-sanctioned consensus rather than spontaneous critical interrogation. So the collective remembrance is directed towards how the state tells you to remember those dead people, how to honor those dead people. So students, overall we were discussing these public monuments, how they are a permanent part of a city's landscape, and how through these public monuments, the state closes the chapter of past violence, the historical violence, the historical trauma is now sealed and given a physical concrete form, so that we can move on, and we should not keep on critically interrogating what happened in the past, because that will be uncomfortable to the state if people keep on interrogating what happened in the past. So students, writing 4 in this discussion does not make any sense, because it goes in a different direction altogether. It says contemporary urban planning is discarding these monuments. That's what makes 4 incorrect, because a while ago we said they are the permanent landscape of the city. They are the concrete structures, which preserve the past. 4 says no, contemporary urban planning is discarding them, doing away with these monumental installations. So this is a complete shift. In the idea that these monuments are no longer being preserved, and contemporary urban planning is doing away with these monuments. And it introduces what? Sustainability goals, a completely different, unrelated idea. Let's move ahead, students. Take a brief pause, and try to figure out what is being discussed. Students, we are discussing, of course, evolution. We are discussing some bit of evolution, and we are discussing, how changes take place. We are discussing phenotypic plasticity. We are discussing phenotypic plasticity. So, if you think carefully, the earlier evolutionary models, the traditional evolutionary models, assumed that structural changes in an organism could only occur through random genetic mutations, that evolutionary changes, evolution used to happen only through genetic mutations, only through genetic changes, through genetic mutations over deep time, over a long duration, over deep time. These genetic mutations resulted in evolution. That's what traditionally we have thought about evolution. That's our traditional thinking about evolution. That's the traditionally vetted approach. That's the traditional evolutionary model. However, now comes the change. Students, now comes the change. The traditional model says these genetic changes, these genetic mutations, these modifications happen over deep time, and that creates evolution. That's the reason for evolution. That's the cause. However, epigenetics has revealed that environmental factors can also alter gene expression. Environmental factors can alter not genetic changes but gene expression. How that gene expresses itself, how it expresses itself, the genetic expression gets changed, not the very structure of the gene. No, that does not change. Environmental factors can directly impact, alter, change the gene expression without modifying. Look at it, students. Without modifying the DNA, without modifying the DNA sequence, even then the expression, genetic expression may change. Genetic expression may change. This phenomenon, which phenomenon? Where environment modifies, where environment alters gene expression, it modifies gene expression without changing, without altering the DNA sequence. DNA sequence remains the same, but its expression changes. This phenomenon is known as phenotypic plasticity. So we are still discussing the same thing. And the answer is, of course, one. That is the unrelated sentence. This phenomenon known as phenotypic plasticity allows an organism to adapt to fluctuating environment, because environment changes the genetic expression without changing the DNA sequence. So the organism is able to what? The organism is able to rapidly adapt to his fluctuating environment within a single generation. Within a single generation, that is how epigenetics has changed our understanding of evolution. Molecular tags. How this happens at the molecular level, at the level of the cell. Now that is being discussed. How the genetic expression changes. The process is being discussed in second. So it is also related, students. It seemed to be unrelated, but it tells you the process through which the genetic expression changes. So it functions. These molecular tags function act as volume knobs, turning specific genetic sequences up or down. When the genetic sequences turn up or down to external pressure, such as famine, such as trauma, then what happens? Gene expression changes. Gene expression changes in response to famine or trauma, what is seen in the environment, in that fluctuating environment. Students, now one introduces a completely different idea. What use are we putting this to? What is the use of all this? What is the use of all this understanding of epigenetics? Such synthetic vectors are now being used to correct hereditary disorders. Students, it's a complete shift. That now such synthetic vectors, which synthetic vectors, team? There is no reference at all of what these synthetic vectors are. Which synthetic vectors are we referring to? There is no prior discussion, and it simply says that these vectors are now being utilized to correct hereditary disorders. So correcting hereditary disorders within human embryos, it's a different idea altogether. It's a complete shift. It moves in a different course altogether. That's why 1 is the answer, the odd one. Let's read the next set of sentences, students. Once again, you have to figure out which is the odd one. Take a brief pause. Now, should I tell you what the answer is? And this is actually a high-level question, a tricky question. All the sentences seem to be related, but the answer is the second sentence. Now let's see. This phenomenon occurs. So we are discussing a certain phenomenon. And what is that phenomenon? Basically, that phenomenon is a liquidity trap. Learn to understand the scope of the paragraph. Students, learn to understand the subject matter. Learn to understand, the scope. That means the length and breadth. What is the length and breadth of this discussion? Which aspects can be discussed, which ideas can be discussed in this paragraph, and which can't be. That is what you need to figure out. So we are discussing what a liquidity trap is, how a liquidity trap gets created. Even that was discussed. To some extent, we even discussed, what's the impact of all that. A liquidity trap represents a severe macroeconomic state. So this is where the topic is introduced. What a liquidity trap is. It represents a severe macroeconomic state where conventional monetary policy becomes entirely ineffective. So conventional monetary policy becomes entirely ineffective. And where are we discussing monetary policy? Injection of liquidity into the banking system. Team, all the connected ideas. Look at it. These are all connected ideas. Is it not monetary policy? Injection of liquidity into the banking system. That is monetary policy. That is money supply. Of course, even in third, this phenomenon occurs when nominal interest rates approach zero, leaving central banks with no room. So central banks are not left with much of a choice. Their instruments of monetary policy cutting down interest rates. Interest rates have already approached zero. So there is no further room for any rate cut. So rate cuts, students, clearly once again we are discussing monetary policy. So what are we discussing? How monetary policy suddenly becomes ineffective in case of a liquidity trap. And what is that liquidity trap? It's a macroeconomic state. It's a macroeconomic state where people, where consumers, businesses, everyone starts hoarding cash. Everyone stops spending, starts hoarding cash, starts keeping cash with him, starts preferring cash. Why? Because they expect the economic downturn. They expect a severe economic downturn, a downturn which is about to be there. Imminent means something that's about to happen. So they expect macroeconomic turbulence. They expect economic downturn. That is why they are hoarding cash. And that hoarding of cash is basically liquidity trap. And in such a liquidity trap, the instruments of monetary policy become ineffective. What is its impact? How it all plays out. So students, 2 is a different idea altogether. Why? Commercial banks may simultaneously, seems related, but there is a catch. May simultaneously tighten lending standards. Commercial banks may tighten lending standards. Okay. They have started lending with much stricter conditions. So their lending has been tightened during periods of financial stress, reflecting heightened concerns about borrower solvency. Team, the borrowers are not insolvent. Borrower insolvency was a complete shift from this discussion. The borrowers are not insolvent. The borrowers are pretty solvent. They are hoarding cash. They have a lot of money. They are sitting on piles of cash. So they have not become insolvent. It's just that they are not willing to spend. They are keeping cash with themselves. They prefer liquidity. It's not that they have become insolvent, that they have gone bankrupt. So it's a completely different aspect altogether. It is totally unrelated that commercial banks start making lending, start toughening the lending standards. They make lending much stricter. They make lending much tougher because they fear that the borrowers have become insolvent. The borrowers haven't become insolvent. They have a lot of cash. It's just that they expect the situation to become worse in the near future. That's why they are not spending. So team 2 is the odd one. Now let's look at this next question, the final one in our discussion. Okay. Take a brief pause. What's the answer? Of course, we are discussing this Chinese room thought experiment. That is the subject matter. And what has it told us? What is the implication? Students, what is the implication of this Chinese room thought experiment? What has it told us? What have we gathered from us? What have we gathered from it? What have we inferred from this Chinese room thought experiment? So students, all the other sentences are connected except one. And what is that? 4. Team, one sentence that's disconnected is of course the 4th one. Now let's see how the others are connected. So as I said, the Chinese room thought experiment. What was the purpose? Was designed to challenge the notion, the idea that running a specific program equates to true human consciousness. It wanted to challenge this idea, disprove this idea, refute this idea. Which idea? That running a specific program is the same as true human consciousness. It is the proof of true human consciousness. So the Chinese room thought experiment wanted to disprove this idea. disprove this idea that this does not indicate true human consciousness by showing that a person inside the room, inside which room? This Chinese room, inside which room? This Chinese room. The person sitting inside the room could produce flawless outputs, without knowing even a single word of the language. That person did not know even a single word of the language, but still that person could produce absolutely flawless, perfect outputs without knowing a single word. It exposes, now this Chinese room thought experiment exposes a fatal flaw in computationalism, the error, the flaw in computationalism. So it demonstrates, what demonstrates? Once again, the Chinese room thought experiment, as I said, what is its implication? What does it demonstrate? What does it show? So what it shows, that mere symbol manipulation, no matter how complex or well programmed, cannot generate genuine intentionality. It does not generate intentionality. It does not mean consciousness, because intentionality, that means you consciously do something. So fifth says, it demonstrates, this whole thing demonstrates that mere manipulation of symbols, no matter how complex those symbols are, how complex that manipulation is, does not indicate genuine intentionality. So still the same thing. This crucial distinction, which crucial distinction? The crucial distinction between doing something, creating an output, producing an output without comprehending it, without understanding it. This crucial distinction implies that syntax alone, structure alone, syntax alone is never sufficient for semantics, for understanding. Even if you can manipulate the symbols, the syntax, the structure of the language, it is not sufficient for semantics, for understanding. Meaning that a machine can simulate copy. Machine can simulate copy comprehension without experiencing it. That means a machine is simulating, just copying comprehension. It is just copying understanding. Team, it is just copying understanding comprehension, but it is not experiencing it. It is not conscious of it. It is not experiencing it. It is not conscious of it. So the understanding is just being copied without there being any consciousness, without there being any genuine intentionality. That is what the Chinese room thought experiment has taught us. That is what we have learned from it. Now team, hold on. What was the focus? Ask yourself. The focus was what this experiment, has told us. What can we infer from it? And what we can infer is this, that okay, a computer system may be quite advanced. It may copy comprehension. It may simulate copy comprehension, understanding, but it may not be experiencing it. But it does not experience it. It does not have consciousness. It does not have genuine intentionality. 4 says subsequent discussions. First things first, subsequent discussions are focused. So it's a complete change. It's a complete shift in the discourse. Subsequent discussions have focused. We were only talking about this Chinese room thought experiment. The subject matter is the Chinese room thought experiment, and if you include subsequent discussions, then it's a shift, then it's a detour. Have focused on whether future artificial systems should be evaluated according to their behavioral performance rather than internal mechanisms. It takes the discussion in a different direction altogether. And what is that changed direction? That changed direction is how exactly should we evaluate an artificial system? What should be the basis or the criteria? What should be the basis or the criteria of evaluating an artificial system? That was not the focus. The focus was not The focus was not the basis or the criteria that we should use, that we should adopt to evaluate an artificial system, to evaluate a computational system. What will be the right criteria? What will be the right basis for such an evaluation? No such discussion took place. No such, discussion was indicated. That's why 4 is the odd one. Students, I hope you have enjoyed this discussion, because this time around, I already told you at the start, the discussion was of, a very high level. So with that, we call it a day. Thank you so much, team.